Okay, today you guys are going to review perfect squares and square roots, and this is something that you learned in 6th grade that carries over to 7th grade. So when we're talking about a square, this is a 7 by 7 square, okay? So the side length is called your square root, okay? And the area, which is the length multiplied by the width, that gives you your perfect square or your area. So again, the side length of a square, that's called your square root. The inside, the space inside is your area, which is your perfect square. So now we're going to prove perfect squares. So this is a 1 by 1 square. So that equals 1. So 1 is your perfect square, and 1 is also your side length. So now we have a 2 by 2, and that equals 4. So 2 is your square root, 4 would be your perfect square. So here we have a 3 by 3 square, and that equals 9. So 3 is your square root, 9 is your perfect square. And then we have a 4 by 4 square, and that equals 16. So 4 is your square root, 16 would be your perfect square. So now what we're going to do is go over to this number line, and we're going to fill in all of the perfect squares and square roots so we have that to look back to if we need to. So we're going to start with 0. 0 times 0 is 0. So the square root of 0 is just 0. Okay, so then we have 1. 1 times 1 is just 1, so the square root of 1 equals 1. 2. 2 times 2 is 4, so the square root of 4 equals 2. So now we have 3. 3 times 3 is 9, so the square root of 9 is 3. Let me use a different color. 4 times 4 is 16, so the square root of 16 is 4. 5 times 5 is 25, so the square root of 25 equals 5. 6 times 6 is 36. So the square root of 36 equals 6. Okay, now we have 7 times 7, and that's 49, so the square root of 49 is 7. 8 times 8 is 64, so the square root of 64 equals 8. 9 times 9 is 81, so the square root of 81 equals 9. Okay. 10 times 10 is 100, so the square root of 100 equals 10. 11 times 11 is 121, and so that the square root of 121 equals 11. 12 times 12 is 144, so the square root of 144 equals 12. 13 times 13 equals 169, so the square root of 169 equals 13. 14 times 14 is 196, so the square root of 196 equals 14. 15 times 15 is 225, so the square root of 225 equals 15. 16 times 16 is 256, so the square root of 256 is 16. 17 times 17 is 289, so the square root of 289 equals 17. 18 times 18 is 324, so the square root of 324 equals 18. 19 times 19 is 361, so the square root of 361 equals 19. And then our last one that we're responsible for knowing is 20 times 20, which is 400. So the square root of 400 is 20. So now you can look back at those anytime that you need it. And we're going to use that to help us with these examples over here. And then we're going to use a multiplication sentence to prove it. So the square root of 36 would be 6, and we know that because 6 times 6 equals 36. 20 squared is 400 because that just means 20 times 20, and I know that that equals 400. The square root of 1 is 1, and that's because 1 times 1 equals 1. The square root of 361 is 19 because 19 times 19 equals 361. 3 squared is 9 because 3 times 3 equals 9. The square root of 81 is 9, and that's because 9 times 9 equals 81. The square root of 256 is 16 because 16 times 16 equals 256. The square root of 225 is 15 because 15 times 15 equals 225. 7 squared, and again, if you look over here at the 7, 7 times 7 equals 49. And then the square root of 324 is 18 because 18 times 18 equals 324. Please go back and review any parts of this video if you need help or you need to refresh your brain on perfect squares and square roots. Also, reach out to your teacher if you have questions.